So we're about to start. I'm just gonna go over some of the stuff. Okay, so when you're ready to create an artboard, you want to keep in mind what size you want to make your artboard. And the really cool thing about Illustrator is that it calculates your artboard for you. So if you need to create something in pixels, you can do that. You can create something in inches and points and so on. The thing that I find really helpful with this is that I never know what sort of pixels or points to make because I can't really imagine that in my head. So I like to switch the increments of measurements to inches. And when you do this, then you're able to enter in something that makes a little bit more sense to you. So let's say that we were going to create a business card. I'm going to make an artboard that is 3 inches by 2.5 inches, which is standard for a business card, and I have it in inches there. You want to make sure that you have 300 dpi or ppi for pretty much everything you make. I've never not done this. It is just a much better quality, so just always make sure it's on 300. And if you're printing, then make sure that the color mode is in CMYK. So we're going to start this artboard here, and it is in pixels now, but it's supposed to be 3 inches by 2.5, which I don't think is a standard business card now that I see it, because that looks like a weird shape to me. But that is 3 inches by 2.5 inches. So we have an artboard here, and the really cool thing about artboards is that you can create a bunch of them. It's over here on the left side of the tool panel, and the key command for that is Shift O. And this key command is really helpful because then you can instantly select your artboard. It brings you into the artboard panel where you can copy and paste artboards, you can move them around, you could rename them, although I recommend to rename your artboard elsewhere, which I will go over later. So I just did Control C and Control V for copy and paste, and what it did was it pasted the exact same artboard with the exact same dimensions. This is really, really useful because you want to make sure that all your graphics are the right sizes and that your logos match up with each other, that everything is the same size. Okay, so I'm just gonna open up a file that I've been working on to show you sort of what you can do with these artboards. So as you can see, I have a bunch of the same artboard that I've copied and pasted, and I've made different variations of this logo, which is really nice because if you go to File, Export, and Export for Screens, then this window pops up and you're able to save each individual artboard as any file type that you'd like in any location that you'd like. You can also easily name all your artboards here, which I prefer over trying to double click your artboard and renaming it, or renaming it in the layers panel. The selection tool is V for Victor. This tool is sort of like a move tool. You can transform things with it, you can select things with it easily and move them around, which is very nice. There's another tool that looks a lot like it called the direct selection tool, and that key command is A for alpha. They look very similar and they work very similar as well. However, let's say you have a shape here, so I just drew this rectangle here with M. The key M is for rectangle. With the selection tool, I can easily transform it, I can round the corners. With the direct selection tool, I can double click these anchors and really edit them any way that I want to. I can distort the shape, I can individually edit a corner. So as you can see, the selection tool does more basic stuff and the direct selection tool is more direct. So here I am just playing around with the shape, showing the sorts of things you can do with it. Alright, so when you're creating a shape, another cool key command that you can use is the plus button. while you're using the direct selection tool and you're selected on a shape, use the plus button to add an anchor tool onto the path. So I just clicked onto the path and added an anchor tool. I then switched to the direct selection tool using A and was able to manipulate it. To get rid of that anchor, use the minus button. You can do this to clean up a lot of your shapes. I use the minus button to clean up a lot of my extra anchor points that I don't need. The pen tool is P for pizza. And the pen tool is really useful. It is just probably the cleanest way to draw in Illustrator. And it does have a little bit of a learning curve, but once you know how to use it, it is really helpful. And one thing that I found that really helps me when using the pen tool is holding down shift. So I will show you that in just a second. So this is just me freely using the pen tool, and it can be wonky. I'm trying to draw a circle even though there is shape buttons for that. I'm trying to show you how it's kind of hard to get a perfect curve, and you have to do a lot of work and it's tedious. If you hold down shift while you are drawing, then it will create a straight line. It goes horizontally, vertically, diagonally. It will suggest places for you to put your anchor. With the blue line, it'll suggest lines, but it won't be the same as when you're freely doing it. So you can see here, this is where it's suggesting me to put my anchor while I'm holding down shift. If I'm not holding down shift, that is totally free and it doesn't suggest. So I'm just going to show here how you can make a perfect curve. So I'm holding down shift while I'm dragging these handles out here, and that way I'm able to create a more perfect curve. And shift is really good for straight lines, for curves. You can let go and you can use the blue line to kind of see where it's going to land. So then I go in and I try to do it myself without the shift to show you how it's a little bit harder. Now they look almost the same. I'm not too bad at that, but it's just so much easier to have the shift button to get a very perfect curve. So you can use the selection tool to just move around some shapes. Direct selection tool is A, change the anchor points. Now we're going to go into the type tool, which is T, and that just draws a text box for you. You can drag out a text box and type in some text, change the font. Over on the properties panel on the right, you can do a ton of stuff with your text. You can change glyphs, you can change spacing. If you press the three little dots underneath character, you can view more stuff as well. So there's a lot more menus in here. You just got to look for some. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create outlines of this text because I want them to be shapes and not editable text anymore. So I'm going to right click and select create outlines, which is also Shift Control O, or you can find it under quick actions when you're selected on text. So I have this as a shape now and it's just grouped together. I get the pencil tool with N, or over on the left you can see a little pencil. I have the shape still selected, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it directly onto that stroke. I probably should have turned this into an outline so it's easier to see, but if you draw in the middle, it's just going to create another shape. But if you select the path, the outline of the shape, or an anchor point within that shape, then it will just add on to the shape. I struggled here thinking that it did create two shapes because I missed, but it just created some extra wonky lines. So once I figure that out, I will figure that out. How I'm zooming in and out is holding down Alt or Command and scrolling in and out. You can also do this side to side by holding down Control and scrolling in and out. That is extremely helpful and so much faster than trying to select that zoom button. It's horrible. Okay, so we're going to go into the Smooth tool, which I had a hard time finding at first. And the way that I found it was because all of these tools here aren't the ones I normally use. And I had to go to Window, Workspace, and change my workspace. They have a bunch of different options there. You can choose things that have to do with different types of projects. So it sort of curates your tools for you. So this is me looking for that window there. And here it is. So you have Essentials, Essentials Classic, Layout, Painting, Printing and Proofing, Tracing, Typography, Web. There's so much you can do. You can create your own. And I just sometimes have a hard time switching back and forth. I haven't found one that exactly works for me yet. So just play around with that. If you haven't seen some of the tools in there, you may find some new tools you haven't seen before. Alright, so then we're going to move into the smooth tool, which is over here on the left side of the toolbar. I do not have a key command for this, so I just select it from the toolbox. And it just has these little lines over this pencil here. And the cool thing about the smooth tool is, see, when you use the pencil tool, you get all these anchor points. And the smooth tool, if you just select it and then draw over that line sort of where you would like the shape to be and just keep drawing over it, it will smooth out these anchor points and delete some. It'll smooth out the lines. It's not totally perfect, but it definitely gets you a lot further very quickly. So you can see here that that shape has like a really weird line that's just going through there, and I will be fixing that in just a minute. Yeah, see how the lines still aren't perfect. So then I would go in and I would use my minus button with my pen tool and delete some of these anchor points to make it easier on myself. And then I'd probably go in there anyway with the direct selection tool and really make sure those curves are perfect. Because when you're working with typography, you really want to make sure that the letters are really clean, and you really want to make sure that they're geometrical and that they match up together. So here I am trying to figure out that little shape there. I keep thinking that it's two shapes, but it is one, and I figured that out. And then I head over to the shape builder tool, which is over there on the left, but it's also, I believe, Shift plus M. So when you select on this, you can hover over objects and it'll show you different shapes. You can see how that line created two different shapes. I just drag through and then it creates one shape. It didn't get everything, so I just drag through again. I zoomed in a little too much. So I just drag through again and it'll fix that problem. Now it's all one shape. So then I show you it is freely moving around as one shape. So I added that little shape on there with the pencil tool, and it is now part of the letter. So that's really nice if you just want to change up some text and sort of make it your own. It's lots of fun. The pencil tool makes it easy to quickly draw something out. Now the shaper tool is right next to the smooth tool, and that is Shift plus N for November. The really cool thing about the shaper tool, and I just found out about this today, is that you can quickly draw a shape on the artboard and it will make a perfect shape for you. And this just blows my mind. So that just saves a lot of time. It's just a stroke. You can manipulate it however you'd like. It also will draw a line. It'll draw a box, and it filled in my shape for me and outlined it. Great tool. So one thing you can do over in the properties panel is just really explore over here. You can select this stroke or opacity word here and more options will pop up. You can also press the FX or the three little dots and just play around. You can change the width profile of your stroke. You can change the caps and the corners. You can change where the outline is from the guideline and all sorts of stuff. The opacity is another really cool one. You can change the blending mode in there, and I really love to do that with like a color over a picture or something to quickly give it a new effect. You can even add an arrowhead onto the end of your stroke within that stroke panel. So you can quickly make an arrow, and here I am making a little arrow here. A lot of learning this program is just looking around and trying things out. Okay. So we're going to go over the curvature tool now, and I wish that I would have known about this a long time ago because it's so helpful. So it's right next to the pen tool, and it looks a lot like it. It's just got a little squiggly line coming from it. So the difference between the pen tool and the curvature tool is that the pen tool is more free and the curvature tool suggests perfect curves to you. I really like to use the curvature tool within text. So here I am selecting the text to show you what it can do. I'm just showing you how the curvature tool can draw. So here it is drawing a shape, it's filling it in. But you can see the blue line is suggesting where that curve will be. So you can kind of get an idea of where it's going to land before you click. And then finally, I am messing with the type. Okay, so here you can see I'm dragging the curvature tool and it made that so much nicer. You can also make a point instead of a curve. If you just double click on the anchor point, it'll change it to a point or to a curve, which is really helpful because before I used to use the direct selection tool, double click on an anchor point, go over to the properties panel, and then change whether or not it's an angle or a curve. This makes it extremely easy and saves me a lot of going back and forth with my mouse. Okay, so I'm going to try the type on a path tool. And I'm just going to click on this path here. Make sure you click right in that blue line in the middle, which I wasn't doing. So a warning kept coming up telling me to click in the right spot. However, the message is kind of confusing. So just make sure you click right on that blue line when you're trying to do this. So as you can see, when I do select that blue line, it puts the text right over the path. So here I do this weird shape to show you a little bit more. Select right on that blue line, and there it is. So then you can type, and it's going to type along the path. You can change the phase of where your text is at within the settings. You can change where the anchor points are for the X and Y axes. And then I finally get that one to work. So here I am texting on it, changing the size, and you can see that it's on that path. Now if I were to move it around that corner, it would follow that corner as well. I don't really prefer the line tool over the pen tool because the line tool doesn't really have a lot of manipulation that you can do with it, and I just feel like the pen tool is easier. Just hold down shift to make sure it's a perfect line. The rectangle tool, okay, so there's all the shape tools underneath that rectangle tool, and some of the shape tools are cool. You know, you got your rectangles, your ellipses. Rectangle is M and ellipse is L. Hold down shift to make it perfect. You also have a star that you can create. Hold on, back up. Alright, so if you hold down shift while you're creating a shape, here I am creating some ellipses, and I created these with the L tool for Lima. And then I selected M for Mike as the rectangle. M for Mike as the rectangle. Here's the star. As I'm dragging out the star, I can select up or down on my keypad and change the amount of points that are on it. So I'm dragging it out and taking some off. You can add a bunch of them to make like a cool star shape, or you can just go all the way down, which gives you a triangle, which is very helpful because there is not a triangle tool under these shape tools for some reason, although it is a very common shape. I hate the flare tool. I don't really recommend this tool. There's just way too much going on, and I don't really understand how to manipulate it too much. So if someone does figure out how to make this look good, I would love to see how you do that. Width tool. So the width tool is right here. It looks like a funny little shape over on the left. What it does is you can go over some stroke, not a shape, but the stroke of a shape. So the outline, you can change the width of it by using this tool. So you select it, and then you hover over and you hold down on that blue line and drag out, and you got some anchor. You got an anchor there, and you got some handles that come out, and you can drag them out and change the width of that stroke. So you can really change the shape of whatever it is that you're drawing there. This is nice for text as well. It's just a good way to add a little interest to the stroke that you're making. Sometimes you don't want it to be perfect. Or sometimes something is just a little too thin on a letter and you want to fix it. Very helpful. Here I am doing it on another stroke. You can really manipulate this. There's a few anchor points within there, and you can really change that shape, as you can see that I'm doing there. So that's an awesome tool. Okay, so I was just playing around with some of these shapes next to this flare tool and this width tool. This one right here is the crystallize tool that I was playing around with, which I thought was really cool. You can warp, distort, pucker, bloat. There's all sorts of things that you can do under that menu there. If you just right click over the width tool, then you can find those. Alright, so I want to take these shapes over here and I want to duplicate them. So how I duplicate them, first I'm going to group them together so I can duplicate all the shapes at once. So I'm going to press Control G to group them all together. So now there is a group. So when I use my selection tool, it'll select the group. If I double click, it'll move into isolation mode, and I can use my direct selection tool from there. Or I can just select my direct selection tool and double click and manipulate from there. Moving it around. Okay, so how you duplicate. is you're going to hold down Alt or Command and just drag from that shape. All right, go back. We're going to talk about the Pathfinder here. So the Pathfinder is over on the right side under the Properties panel. And what this is good for is overlapping stuff. So here I am overlapping some shapes. I select both of them with the selection tool to get all of both shapes. If I were to select them with the direct selection tool and I only selected, let's say, half of the shapes on the box, here you can see that I'm using the selection tool and they're moving around freely. And then I move over to the direct selection tool and I select maybe half the shape. Now, only half of the shape is selected because I'm using the direct selection tool, so it distorts the shape. So just make sure that you're using the selection tool when you move these around or move things around if you don't want them to distort. So I have these shapes overlapping, and then I want to go over into the Pathfinder. And the first option is to just join them together, which just creates one shape. You can minus the front shape, you can minus the back shape, you can keep only the intersection, or you can delete the intersection. This is really helpful to like create some cool graphics. You can create some really cool negative space with this. So just try to play around with that. All right, so to duplicate a shape, you hold down Alt or Command on Windows and just drag the shape out. And there you go. You got a duplication of the exact same group that you have there. You can do this with any of your assets, and I use it all of the time. So you don't have to make it again. You don't have to try to make it look exactly like the thing you just made. Just hold it down. So if you want to duplicate something, but you want it to stay in line of the thing you duplicated it from, hold down Shift. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold down Alt to duplicate the shape, drag the shape out a little bit first, and then hold down Shift and drag, and it will set it back on its course. The reason that you want to hold Alt first and drag a little bit first is so it doesn't think that you're just trying to move that original shape, which I end up doing all the time. So if you're having troubles with this, just make sure you hold down Alt first, drag the shape just a tiny bit, and then start holding down Shift as well, and then it will set it back in place. And then when you're moving it around, just hold down Shift to keep it in space. So I have these three groups over here, and I want them to go over to this other artboard. And maybe I want them to be in the exact same spot. So I'm going to copy them with Control-C while they're selected. And then I'm going to select this artboard with my selection tool. And it is really hard to tell, but there is a very slight outline on that artboard, a very slight black outline. Almost impossible to tell. So you can press Shift-O for the artboard tool and just ensure you're selected on it. And you can tell because it's blue and not gray. And it's highlighted. All right, so we're selected on that. We already copied it with Control-C. So then once you select the artboard that you want it to go to, what you're going to do is you're going to hold down Shift, Control, Alt or Command, and V for Victor. So in this order, Shift, Control, Alt or Command, and V for Victor. And what this is going to do is it's going to paste it in exactly the same space that it was in the other artboard. So if you have an asset that you need to be in the same space on every artboard and you don't want it to sort of move a tiny bit between artboards, you can easily paste it in place with Shift, Control, Command or Alt, and V. So I got this cool little shape and I want to create a clipping mask. So I'm going to place an image here. I just got a PNG here and I placed it using File, Place. And then I just clicked on my artboard and it made it huge and it went all over the place. I have to zoom out. My files are usually really big, so it takes forever to zoom out. So another way that you can do this is when you place your photo, so File, Place, find your photo, and your mouse is holding on to it right now. So then I just drag out and it keeps the aspect ratio of the image that I have selected, but it just makes it that size of your selection instead of making it huge all over your canvas. So I have my PNG here. and I want it to go inside of this weird shape that I have. So I'm just gonna make it big enough to fill up the shape, and I'm holding down Shift to keep the integrity of the size of the photo. And then I move it behind, and the way that you can change the order of the objects is holding down Control and using the bracket keys, either left or right. Left is down and right is up. So you can easily change the order. Now the thing with this is if you have a lot of shapes like I usually do, here I am moving over to the layers to show you. I am not organized at all with this, and this is what it looks like a lot of the time, honestly. Changing the order can be hard when you have thousands of shapes, so keeping this organized is very crucial, and I struggle with that. Okay, so I have my shape over my picture that I want to be inside the shape, and this way you can see what you're doing. All you have to do is select both and right click and select Make Clipping Mask, or you can go over onto the Properties panel under Quick Actions and select Make Clipping Mask. Now something that I did all the time, because I've been struggling with clipping masks for a very long time, is that I thought that there was some sort of significance in which one you select first or which order they're in, and I found that if you keep the image over the shape, it will not work. And that is what I tend to try to do every single time. So just remember to keep your shape over your image and try to right click on the shape. And it's very similar in Photoshop as well. This is really helpful because you can get some really cool shapes for pictures and clean up your artboard a little bit. So there we go, I got my clipping mask. You can double click inside here if you want to move it around and change the image inside. You can change the sizing of it. Okay, so something that I have a lot of the time is I'll have assets all over my artboard, and some of them will be just hanging off. Like, let's say I have this rectangle here, which I selected by using M for Mike, and I dragged it out here. I want that to be a border on my artboard, and it's not going to show when I export it. It's not going to show the overhang. However, it is kind of in the way. So if I were to create another artboard and pasted it, like copied and pasted it, then it would have pasted over that asset, and now it's moving the asset around. So one way that you can move your artboard without moving all your assets around is to go to the Properties panel and unselect Move Artwork with Artboard. So then you can just freely move your artboard. But if I wanted to move the assets that were supposed to be in there and not that rectangle that was part of the other artboard, I can fix that by creating a clipping mask over that artboard, or I can go to View and Trim mode, and then it trims the view for each artboard. All the assets that are within the artboard are still there. They're just hidden. You can see I'm selecting them there and they are still there. They're just hidden. You can drag them down still, and it just cleans up your workspace. Very helpful and so much easier to see. Alright, so gradients. So the way you can create a gradient is you can either select the gradient tool on the left hand side, you can select Control plus G for golf, so Control G, and that will bring up, oh excuse me, not Control G because that is group. So gradient, so you select the gradient tool and then you just click inside of a shape that you've created and you have this gradient here. So on one of the sides you can rotate it, so you can change the angle of it. You can double click the color, double click the circles to change the colors. You can change it to radial or points, lines. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do with the gradients. You can even expand the shape and make it into a vector. You can pick colors as well. So that's just a quick basic on the gradient. The next thing is probably my absolute favorite tool in Illustrator, and I know that Professor Moody has talked about this before. However, I never really tried it out until I started my internship and realized that I really wanted to use my Procreate drawings, but I wanted them to be vectors. And I didn't want to take hours using the pen tool over a slowly less opacity layer of my drawing and then just drawing over it. It takes forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import a PNG into Illustrator. So here I am importing a PNG and dragging it out because that's the way I like to do it. So here we have a PNG and it looks very nice here. However, if you zoom in, you can see all of these pixels, and it's obviously raster and not vector. So the way that you can do that is while it is selected, over here on the properties panel on the right hand side under quick actions, there are some options over here. You can embed, edit in Photoshop, mask, crop image, or image trace. So select image trace here, and then it will give you a drop down menu of different types of images that you can render. This is silhouettes, line art, doesn't look so well. It takes a little bit for it to load because this is a lot for it to process, so try not to do too much because this can be a little bit tasking on your computer. I usually use high fidelity photo just because it looks so nice, but it is the biggest process for your computer. But here I am with the high fidelity photo and I'm zooming in and it looks amazing. And remember before it was all pixelated. So that's very nice. So I have this high fidelity photo. It still looks like a PNG, but what if I wanted to manipulate it and like move around these objects too? I mean, it's a vector. I should be able to do that. So what you're going to do is while it's selected, select expand under quick actions and it will expand your shape. So it expanded my shape and I just like to delete the background so I can see what I'm working with. So I just double click the background to make sure that that shape is selected and I delete that. Now you can't really see anything because it's in white, so I go to view and view transparency grid, and what this does is it just shows a transparent background. If you want to save transparent PNGs, this is a good way to double check that those look good. I always have this selected before I export at some point. So I'm just deleting the stuff that I don't really like about the new vector, but you can see that I can move it around and this is extremely quick for what it did. So I'm just bringing in another image. I clicked and it made it huge again, so I decided to redo it because I wasn't going to deal with that. Place and drag. There we go. So I have this example here. This is my YouTube banner, and I actually created these snakes with the pen tool, which was a lot of work, and I wish that I would have known about this before I created it, so I could have just drawn it with Procreate. So this is a really detailed image and I want to vectorize it. So you probably think that that is not going to work very well. So I select image trace and I am going to try 3 colors this time because I want to simplify it. I don't want it to be as detailed as it is because it's just going to be a lot to work with, which I will show you afterwards. So I switched it to 3 colors and you can see it's a lot more simple, but it still looks pretty clean. So then I'm just going to expand this to look at what the shapes look like, and it's going to have a lot of anchor points in here and it's going to be kind of complicated, but with this 3 color option, it's not too bad. And it's pretty doable. Like, that is manageable. That's not too bad. There are an excess of anchor points, but you can still clean it up if you'd like. now I'm going to show you what the high fidelity photo would look like and to show how good that this could be. So I'm just going to go back to the regular, and then I'm going to select high fidelity photo, and it's going to process it. Alright, here, so I've changed it to high fidelity photo and it's processed, and it looks like the original image, but it's not, it's a vector. I've expanded it, and now you can see what the shapes look like with a high fidelity photo. As you can see, this is totally unmanageable, but it also looks really cool. This is a lot of work for your computer, so you definitely want to try to simplify it as much as possible after this. You can always go to Object and Path and Simplify to delete some of those anchor points and try to get better curves and stuff like that. You can select the 3 little dots to get some more options. I'm just moving around some of the shapes to show you. It is really detailed and insane, and be really careful with this tool because of that, but it is really helpful. So for example, this logo up here that I totally ruined, and also my own logo. So here's the sketch for my own logo. I used this tool for it and vectorized it, and then I changed some things, but you can see my logo is very similar. I used it for this daisy one up here that I ruined. I drew that by hand. I drew the letters daisy by hand and then had them vectorized by using the image trace tool, and that made my process so much faster. So what you can do is you can take your sketches, your Procreate drawings, you know, really anything that you plan on using for your process, you can get that done by hand quickly, and you can easily vectorize it in Illustrator and then just select the direct selection tool and tweak it a little bit, make it look better, and you're done. So I hope that all really helped you guys out, and I hope that this was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to try to film a couple more with a couple more really cool Illustrator tricks, but I will be posting this video on the Discord, and I appreciate you guys. Have a good one.